Well, welcome to the weekly webinar where QuickSight customers will learn about product functionalities, new feature launches, best practices, and tips on how to improve the QuickSight user experience. These are led by QuickSight solutions architects like myself, as well as QuickSight product management. Today's focus is on basic calculations. My name is Kelly Burton. I'm a senior QuickSight solutions architect. Before we get started today, we're going to look at the QuickSight community. The QuickSight community is a place to connect with other QuickSight users, and it should be the first place you should look to find answers. You can search for answers, you can ask new questions, and you can connect with other users and find new resources. We post all the latest announcements, blogs, and learning resources in the community. And we give you access to lots of examples in our Demo Central, which we will be going through today in our demos. In order to utilize QuickSight Community, we're going to incorporate the question and answer portion of today's presentation into the QuickSight Community. So we ask you to add tags to your questions to help find topics and allow other users to search for answers. So today, when you need to ask a question during the presentation, we do have Alex, a fellow solutions architect on my team, available and monitoring the Q&A section in the QuickSight community. So let's take a look at how you can ask that question. So here I am in the QuickSight community. In order to ask a question in today's session, I'm going to ask you to click on question and answer, select new question. You can type a title or general description. I want you to select a tag. Today's tag is QLS-basic-calc. This tag will notify Alex that a new question has been entered, and he will help you provide an answer. So apply the tag, ask your question in the body of the message, and then select new question. Today's session will be recorded and it will be shared with all attendees today. The link will be posted to our QuickSight YouTube channel, as well as the QuickSight community. So now let's focus on today's session. So when we talk about calculations in QuickSight, there are two types of calculations: basic calculation and advanced calculation. Today's focus will be on the basic calculations. What we're going to learn is an overview of how we define basic calculations. We're going to look at the pre-built function categories that are available within QuickSight. And then we're going to see how you can build these basic calculations in QuickSight for your particular use case. In QuickSight, calculations can be defined in two locations: in the dataset layer and in the analysis layer. In the analysis layer, calculations are always evaluated on the analysis or dashboard load. In the dataset layer, row-level calculations will be pre-computed and results stored if your data set is in SPICE mode. You can push aggregate calculations to the data set layer just to help with central storage and defining more of a global calculation. However, it doesn't yield any additional performance benefit because aggregate calculations will be evaluated in the context of the visual. Our focus today, again, is on basic calculations. Those calculations are defined as calculations evaluated on each row. So they potentially supply a different result for every row of data. These calculations can be summed across all dimensions, and they are ideal candidates to include in the data set layer. When we talk about the order of operations, QuickSight does support the standard order of operations. So we're going to look at parentheses first, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and then subtraction. You can see a list on the screen of the available operators. We do have a number of pre-built function categories to help you expedite creating these calculations to meet your use case. We have aggregate calculations, which will include your typical average, sum, min, max. We have sum if, average if, to add some conditional logic. And we also have period to date functions. When we're looking at creating calculated fields with conditional logic, in QuickSight, that's going to be an if-else. You can use nested if-else statements to handle complex use cases. You can see we also support the in, not in, null, not null. Two recent enhancements and added functions are workday functions and the switch function. The workday in QuickSight is calculated Monday through Friday. The switch function is a new function that allows you to create a calculated field if it's based only on the value of another field, a single field, then you don't have to use if else. You can now use switch, which will be more performant. And we're going to take a look at that in the demo. Date functions, lots of questions around how to manipulate dates in QuickSight. So we've got the add date time. We can add work days now. Looking at intervals of date, we can do the date diff function and a number of different functions to extract values, truncate dates, parse dates. So a lot of different options for your use cases. The numeric category is your typical looking at ceiling, looking at floor, being able to transform decimal to integer, integer to decimal. And we have a number of period over period functions that allow you to compare values. And finally, we have our string category. So when we talk about making sure we get that view in the dashboard that we want, maybe it's converting numerics to strings, maybe it's concatenating values, uppercase, lowercase, your string function, trim, locating, all that different text type functions are available in that string category. One thing to draw attention to is the contains function is a newly released function. So you can now look at a field, and if it contains, for example, the value of engineer, then assign another values. With that, let's jump into our demo. Our demo today is going to be completely done within Demo Central. The Demo Central location is something everyone has access to. Within Demo Central, you have access to a number of different categories. Within Demo Central, we have dashboard demos, queue demos, and then a number of different feature and tips and tricks. Today, we're going to start in the dashboard demo section and take a look at the general entrance demo. So here we see we've got some premium information, we got claims data, and it's across a number of different dimensions. We've got producers, territory, distribution channel. So lots of great information to work with. Within Demo Central, you have the ability to access the analysis view. So on the left-hand side, the little bar chart with a pencil, I'm going to select, and that's going to open this dashboard in the analysis view. So at this point, I can see how things are built. I can make changes and just have an opportunity to work within QuickSight. I'm going to add a sheet for us to work with today. And we can see on the left-hand side, we have all of our different fields available. We'll add territory. And I'm just going to create a table. So now that we're in an analysis, maybe we want to look at the count of policies by territory. A really basic calc, but this will give us an opportunity to create this on our own. So I'm going to add a calculation. I'm going to give it a name. And then we can see we have access to the calculation editor. So I can type right within here right now. I also have the ability to use the different menus on the right-hand side. I have access to all my fields, my parameters, and the different functions. So if I collapse all, I can see my different function categories. I'm going to expand aggregate, and we're going to look for the distinct count of our policy number. So what I've done is double click on distinct count. That adds that function into my editor. And then I'm going to go into my fields, and I'm going to search for policy number. I'm going to double click policy number, and that adds that to the calculation. Once I'm finished, I'm going to click save. And if I go search for my new field and add it to my table. So now we can see policy counts by territory. If we'd like to take a look at the ratio of our collected premiums versus claims, that's something we could add as a basic calculation as well. I'm going to go add another calculated field, give it a name, and in this case, I know what my ratio should look like. I know how to build the calculation. So I'm just going to start typing. I know I need the sum of my claims. And as I start typing claims, you can see I've got some autofill coming in, so I can make some selections. So I'm going to look at my sum of claim amount, and then I'm going to divide by the sum of my earned premium. So if you want to take the time to search for functions and look those up, you can, or you can just type your evaluation criteria. I'm going to click save. And now I'll add my ratio. Looks like I'd like to have a format. So on that new calculated field, I'm going to choose to show as percent. So now I'm looking at the ratio of my earned premium to my claims. I think I'll go ahead and add a date to this. So we'll add our summer date. And I'm going to change the aggregation of summary date to year. And maybe sort that descending. So now I can see my territory counts by different years. I have both policy count and that ratio I create. Maybe I'd like to be interested in looking at the premium versus last year. So what's the difference in premium from this year to last year? I could use one of my period over period functions. In this particular dashboard, that calculation has been created. So I'm going to take a look at that. So you can hit the 3 ellipses after a calculated field and choose edit calculated field. Notice here we can see the function that was used and the arguments passed. One thing that I want to highlight is as we look at these functions, as I select one in the calculation editor, I do have the ability to see the definition and a high-level view of the syntax in the bottom right-hand portion of the screen. So we can see for period over period difference, we have to pass in an aggregated measure, a date, and then optional metrics are the actual period interval and the offset. So in this case, we're looking for last year, so one year offset to find that difference. If this definition and basic syntax doesn't give you enough to really understand that function, you can select Learn More. This will take you directly to the documentation for that function, and you can have more detail. Typically, there's also at least one example available. So now that we've seen that written premium last year difference, I'm just going to cancel out of this and add it to my table. So now we can see that metric added. If we decide we'd like to look at that by month, we can do that as well. So I'm going to go back into that calculation. I'm going to change it, the name of it, from year to month. And I'm going to change the interval. Save. And now when I change my aggregation type to month for my summary date, I can see the last month difference by territory. So it's very easy to access the calculation editor, find some definitions, and be able to add these calculations to your analysis. One thing we haven't taken a look at is the ability to use one of my favorite new functions, which is switch. So I'm going to look at an insured employee tier calculated field. So right now, this is calculated and available to me. This was created as a nested if else. This works. It will still work. Nothing wrong with doing this. However, this if else is based upon a single field. So it's always saying if employee size tier is something, then I'm going to assign a value. We're not using multiple inputs. We're not doing an and or. It's just really a simple one-for-one. So it's a great example of where we could implement switch. This will also gain you more performance improvement. So let's change this to switch. So with the switch function, I give it the call, and then what field is this based on? It's based on my employee size tier. I'm going to go ahead and remove that paren. And if employee size tier is 1, then I'm going to label my new field insured employee tier this 1 to 100. If it's 2, 101 to 501. If it's 3, 501 to 1000. Otherwise, we're going to give it a known. And then we're going to close the paren to close the input. If I want to take a look at the details of the switch function, I can do that as well. Select the switch. I see the overview. I see the syntax. And I can go learn more. The learn more is one of my favorite things because you can always see those examples. So here you can see with switch, we've got a similar example of what we're doing now, only with region. But you also see the ability to apply some mathematic expressions as well. So I really encourage you to use that show more and look at what you can do with the calculations. So now I've changed insured employee tier to the switch function, and I'm going to choose save. It found an error, and that error is because I left a comma out. And now I'm going to add insured employee tier to my table, and I'll remove territory, just clean things up a little bit. So then we see our metrics by the insured employee tier. So I focused this first part of the demo on just creating some basic calcs, using the calculation editor, exploring the functions. When we start applying this to real-world use cases, the level of complexity increases. So I definitely want to draw your attention to some more detailed examples. Within Demo Central, we've been focused on the dashboard demo section. So in each of these dashboards, you can explore, go to the analysis, and look for different calculations. I also encourage you to look at both the feature demo and the tips and tricks section. Within the feature demo, I've got one I would like to focus on today. This is the calculation using period function. When we take a look at this example, what this does is it's calculating this offset sales field, but it's allowing the user to pick the offset period as well as the offset value. And then that calculation is dynamically computing based upon those selections. So this is one of those typical use cases that we hear from customers. So how is this created? I'm going to open the analysis mode. Remember, you can get to that on that left-hand side, bar chart with the pencil. As the analysis opens, I just want to make sure I show you the way this was created. So there are two parameters created, offset period, and then a control for that parameter that offers these three values, month, quarter, and year. There's also a parameter created for offset value and a control created in the slider. So in order to create the calculated field for offset sales, the period over period last value function is what's used, but we're combining that with an if else as well as utilizing the parameter values. So we wrap it in an if else. So if offset period, the radial box of year is selected, then period over period last value function, we're summing sales by our date value for the year interval. And the offset value is coming from the offset value parameter. And the same goes for the quarter and month. So you can utilize parameters within your calculation. Again, if you want more detail, you have the ability to search within your function. And you can see all the different period over period comparisons. One last example that I want to show today comes in the tips and tricks section. Within tips and tricks, notice calculation is the first label of the first almost 10 entries. So we have a lot of content out on Demo Central to help you get started with calculations. Now, one of my favorites is this duration time format. I like this one because it uses that conversion to string. It's a lot of nested, but the whole point is on your dashboard, you want a very clean looking time value. So what's coming in your data is average talk time. So you have this one field, average talk time in seconds. And what you want to display to your users is this nice hour, minute, second view. So how do we go from just seconds as a numeric to this particular view? Well, I'm going to open up the analysis mode again. As the analysis is loading, you can see I've got a number of different calculations available, but my favorite is looking at this all as one. So this is taking average talk time in seconds concatenating together once we figure out what is the hour value, what's the minute value, what's the second value, concatenating those three values together with the colon in between. So you can see with the first if else, we're looking for hours. If it's less than 10, we know we got to concatenate that 0 to the actual value. Else, we're just looking at that floor value, that closest lowest integer. Next, we're looking for minutes, where we're using the percent here. So we're doing the division and taking the remainder. Looking for minutes. Doing the if-else check for that less than 10 to concatenate the 0. Then we're taking these numeric values, turning them into strings. And then finally, we do the same thing for seconds. This looks complicated, but really what we do in QuickSight, and for me, what a great way to start is to break it down in pieces. Step 1, let's figure out what the hours are. Step 2, the minutes. Step 3, the seconds. Then let's put them all together. And we're going to be able to see that. That was the approach this developer took in their calculations. So as you're developing calculations, particularly the first few times, it's a great way to break it into pieces. And then once the pieces are getting you the answer that you expect, then work on putting them together. Those are the 3 examples. And what I'm calling 3 is the dashboard example, where you create some specific use cases. Then we look at using parameters with period over period. And then looking at the complexity of bringing together multiple calculations with if-else, with some numeric functions, with some string functions, to get the result that you want. These are all available to you on Demo Central, so I definitely encourage you to go out and explore those. I'm going to jump back to my slides now, just to kind of round out today's session. I'm going to leave you some reference material. The AWS documentation for calculations is very good. I really like the examples. So I really encourage you, search for your function, choose Learn More. On the QuickSight community, go to the articles. Lots of information on calculations. We've got blogs, there's individual articles, there's how-tos. So definitely check that section out in the community. And then I've just left a few general links available. Demo Central is obviously the focus of our demo today, and a great place to see how something's been done. Today we covered basic calculations, row level calcs, doing some if-else, doing some nested strings, and some level of complexity. Next week, we're going to take that a step further. The topic will be advanced calculations. So you'll be able to look at level aware calcs and looking at partitioning by different dimension. So join us next week for that particular topic. You can register on the community at the link provided. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your feedback. If you would take just a few moments, fill out the feedback form. We really want to make these sessions valuable to you. So the feedback you provide will be used to further enhance these sessions. Do you want more events? Understand what's going on within the community? Please look at the community events page. Thank you so much for your time today, and have a great week.